Let My People Go Surfing, The Education of a Reluctant Businessman by Yvon Chouinard. Picture this. It's 1962 in Winslow, Arizona. Two young men, covered in road dust, are yanked from a freight train they'd been hopping. Between them? 15 cents. That's it. The police slap them with a charge that sounds like it's straight out of the Old West. Wandering around aimlessly with no apparent means of support. Their punishment? 18 days behind bars, surviving on nothing but beans and Wonder Bread, each losing 20 pounds in the process. One of those young men was Yvon Chouinard. And that charge? Wandering around aimlessly? Well, it was actually the perfect summary of his entire life philosophy. He wasn't chasing a career, or a corner office, or a fat bank account. He was chasing the next epic rock climb, the next perfect wave, the next wild river. He was a climber, a surfer, a blacksmith, a falconer. The one thing he absolutely never wanted to be? A businessman. And yet, this same guy who got arrested for basically being broke would go on to build Patagonia into a global brand worth billions. A company that would revolutionize the outdoor industry and set the gold standard for how businesses can actually give a damn about the planet. So how does a self-proclaimed dirtbag who lived on 50 cents a day literally ate cat food to save money for climbing trips and slept under boulders for 200 nights a year end up founding one of the most respected companies in the world? That's the wild story we're diving into today, straight from Yvon Chouinard's memoir, Let My People Go Surfing. This isn't your typical business book. It's a blueprint for living life on your own terms. And over the next half hour, I'm going to walk you through his incredible journey, showing you how to build not just a company, but a life packed with purpose, adventure, and integrity. You'll discover why breaking all the conventional rules might just be the secret to real success. To understand Patagonia, you've got to understand Yvon Chouinard. And to understand him, we need to rewind to his childhood. He was the son of a tough French-Canadian handyman, born in a small Maine town. When his family moved to California, he was this small kid with what sounded like a girl's name who couldn't speak a word of English. From day one, he was an outsider. While other kids played baseball, he was sneaking off to fish in private golf course lakes, hunting in the concrete wilds of the Los Angeles River, and swimming in pools of chemical runoff from movie studios. By his own admission, he was a complete misfit. School bored him to tears, he had a serious attitude problem, and detention was practically his second home. But he figured out something crucial early on. If you invent your own game, you get to be the winner every time. His game became the outdoors. He found his tribe in the Southern California Falconry Club, a bunch of fellow misfits. Training wild hawks taught him patience and the power of positive reinforcement, lessons that would later shape how he'd run his company without even realizing it. Through falconry, he discovered climbing. The club needed to rappel down cliffs to reach falcon nests, and for Yvon, it was instant obsession. He and his friends started practicing on the sandstone cliffs of Stony Point, hopping freight trains to get there. No fancy gear, just sneakers, or bare feet and rope they'd borrowed from the telephone company. This wasn't a casual hobby. It was a full-blown obsession. He spent summers climbing in the Teton Mountains, basically faking his way into his first real roped climb, because nobody would take a chance on an inexperienced kid. He learned to be completely self-reliant, because back then, there were no rescue teams. His life was something most of us can't even imagine. For years, he supported himself selling gear from the back of his car, living on 50 cents to $1 a day. He and a friend once bought 2 cases of dented cat food and rounded out their diet with ground squirrels and porcupines. In Yosemite, He and his climbing buddies called themselves the Valley Kong. They were rebels hiding from park rangers, actually proud that their passion had zero economic value to society. To them, corporations were basically the enemy. So how does the business story start? Like everything else in his life, pretty much by accident, born from necessity. In the 1950s, the only climbing gear you could get came from Europe. The pitons, those metal spikes you hammer into rock cracks for safety, were made of soft iron. They were designed to be placed once and left behind, basically scarring the mountain. Chouinard, who'd grown up reading Thoreau and Muir, believed in leaving no trace. He needed something better. So in 1957, he hit up a junkyard, bought a used coal forge and a 138-pound anvil, and taught himself blacksmithing. He started making his own pitons out of tougher steel, salvaged from an old harvester blade. They were strong, reusable, and didn't damage the rock nearly as much. At first, he just made them for himself and his friends. But word spread. He could forge 2 pitons an hour and sold them for $1.50 each. Just like that, he was reluctantly in business. His first shop was a converted chicken coop in his parents' backyard. His business model was beautifully simple. Load up his tools, cruise the California coast, surf, haul his anvil onto the beach to hammer out pitons, and sell them from the back of his car. That tiny blacksmith operation became Chouinard Equipment, and by 1970, it was the biggest supplier of climbing hardware in the United States. And this is where things get really interesting. This moment defines everything Patagonia would become. Chouinard went back to climb the famous nose route on El Capitan in Yosemite, a route that had been pristine just a few years before. What he saw made him sick. The delicate cracks in the rock were scarred and mangled from repeated hammering of his own hard steel pitons. The very tool that built his company, his pride and joy, was destroying the mountains he loved. He'd become what he calls an environmental villain. So what do you do when your biggest success is also your biggest failure? Most business people would check the spreadsheets. Pitons were the heart of the business, the cash cow. But Chouinard wasn't a businessman. He was a climber. He and his partner Tom Frost made a decision that was absolutely insane by any business standard. They decided to phase out the piton business. They chose to intentionally kill their best-selling product. Instead, they championed an alternative British climbers had been using, aluminum chocks that wedged into cracks by hand and could be removed without leaving a trace. In their 1972 catalog, they didn't just introduce the new gear. They published a 14-page essay on clean climbing, basically teaching their customers why their old products were terrible for the planet and how to use the new ones. They were literally telling their customers not to buy their most popular product. The risk was enormous. The result? Revolutionary. Within months, the piton business vanished. The new chocks sold faster than they could manufacture them. This was the company's first major environmental stand, and it set the tone for every decision that followed. When you're choosing between profit and planetary health, the planet wins. Every time. Around this time, the clothing side started, just as accidentally as the hardware. On a climbing trip to Scotland, Chouinard bought a regulation rugby shirt. It was bright, tough as nails, and the collar kept his gear slings from cutting into his neck. Back home, all his climbing buddies wanted one. He started importing them, and they flew off the shelves. He saw clothing as a way to prop up the barely profitable hardware business. But this new venture needed a name. They didn't want to call it Chouinard, because that was for tools, and they had bigger dreams. They landed on a name that conjured images of distant, windswept peaks and glaciers tumbling into the sea: Patagonia. In 1973, they created the now iconic logo, a silhouette of Mount Fitzroy in the Andes. Patagonia's growth was guided by a set of philosophies, deeply held beliefs, that are the real soul of this book. These aren't corporate buzzwords plastered on conference room walls. They're a way of life. The first, and most crucial, is the product design philosophy. This comes straight from Chouinard's blacksmithing days. A tool has to work. Period. At Patagonia, every design starts with a functional need, not whatever's trending on Instagram. Is it durable? Can you repair it? Is it as simple as possible? He was inspired by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, the French aviator who said that perfection isn't when there's nothing left to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. This minimalist, function-first approach is why Patagonia's clothes have this timeless quality. They don't chase fashion because fashion is, by its very nature, disposable. As Chouinard puts it, they're aiming to make art, which is timeless. This philosophy led them to revolutionize outdoor clothing. When everyone was wearing layers of cotton and wool that absorbed sweat and turned you into a popsicle, Patagonia looked for something better. They discovered a synthetic pile fabric used by North Atlantic fishermen. The first fabric they bought was actually intended for toilet seat covers. It was stiff and came in hideous colors, but it was ridiculously warm, insulated even when soaking wet, and dried in minutes. This led to Sinkilla fleece. Then they introduced polypropylene underwear, a material first used in disposable diapers for its moisture-wicking properties. With these two innovations, Patagonia taught the entire outdoor world the concept of layering: a wicking base layer, an insulating middle layer, and a protective outer shell. Their design philosophy also includes something radical: do no unnecessary harm. This pushed them to investigate their own supply chain. When they opened a Boston store, employees started getting headaches from formaldehyde fumes coming off the 100% pure cotton clothing. This discovery horrified them. They learned that conventional cotton farming is one of the dirtiest industries on the planet, responsible for a massive chunk of the world's insecticides and pesticides. So, just like they did with Pittons, they made another insane decision. In 1994, they committed to switching their entire cotton sportswear line to 100% organic cotton by 1996. At the time, there literally wasn't enough organic cotton available. They had to go directly to farmers and build a supply chain from the ground up. It was a massive financial gamble, but they did it. And every cotton garment they've made since has been organic. This commitment to cleaning up their act is ongoing. They developed fleece from recycled soda bottles, created wetsuits from plant-based rubber to replace toxic neoprene, and continuously worked to eliminate harmful chemicals and dyes. The second core philosophy is the human resource philosophy. This is where the book's title comes from. The culture at Patagonia was never your typical corporate nightmare. It was built by and for independent, free-thinking people who loved the outdoors way more than they loved work. Chouinard knew you couldn't boss these people around. You had to trust them. This led to the "let my people go surfing" policy. It's flex time that lets employees go surfing when the waves are pumping, or ski when there's fresh powder, or go home to care for a sick kid, as long as the work gets done. They trust that adults will handle their responsibilities without being chained to a desk from 9 to 5. Chouinard's management style is what he calls management by absence. He trusts his people, and that trust is repaid with fierce loyalty and dedication. The company also pioneered on-site childcare. In 1984, they opened a child development center, one of only 120 in the country at the time. You see kids playing in the courtyards and parents having lunch with their children in the cafeteria. They discovered this benefit wasn't actually a cost, it was a profit center. It helped them attract and keep incredibly talented people, especially women, and the productivity gains from parents not constantly worrying about their kids were huge. The third and maybe most defining philosophy is the environmental philosophy. For Patagonia, protecting the planet isn't a marketing angle. It's their reason for existing. It started in the 1980s when they pledged to donate 10% of their pre-tax profits to small, grassroots environmental groups, the frontline activists. Later, they raised the stakes, committing to donate 1% of total sales, profitable or not. They call it their self-imposed Earth tax. Since 1985, they've given away tens of millions of dollars. This philosophy led Chouinard and his friend Craig Matthews to launch 1% for the Planet in 2001. It's an alliance of businesses committed to donating 1% of their sales to environmental causes. Their mission is to prove that environmentalism isn't a cost. It's a source of profit and pride. But even with all this success, the road wasn't smooth. By the late 1980s, Patagonia was growing at breakneck speed, with sales exploding from 20 million to 100 million in just a few years. They were becoming the kind of massive company Chouinard had always hated. He felt they were outgrowing their natural niche and losing their soul. Then, in 1991, they hit a wall. A recession slammed the country, and the explosive growth they'd planned and bought inventory for just stopped. Dealers canceled orders, and their bank, also struggling, slashed their credit line. They were facing a catastrophic cash crunch. The company had never laid anyone off. It was like a family, full of friends and relatives. But they had no choice. On a day they now call Black Wednesday, they let go of 120 employees, 20% of their workforce. It was the darkest day in the company's history. This crisis was a brutal wake-up call. Chouinard realized his own company had become a miniature version of the global economy, hooked on unsustainable growth. He took his top managers on a walkabout to the real Patagonia in Argentina. There, surrounded by the wild mountains that inspired their company's name, they asked themselves the tough questions. Why are we in business? What kind of company do we want to be? They came back with renewed commitment. They decided to limit their growth to a natural, sustainable rate. They wouldn't chase sales. They'd focus on quality, values, and mission. The crisis forced them to actually live the philosophies they'd always preached. It made them stronger, more focused, and ultimately more successful. In recent years, that mission has evolved even further. Chouinard realized that doing less harm isn't the same as doing good. That insight led to their most ambitious project yet, Patagonia Provisions. It's a food company built on the belief that modern industrial agriculture is one of the biggest threats to the planet. They're working with farmers and ranchers who use regenerative organic practices that actually heal the soil, pull carbon from the atmosphere, and help reverse climate change. They're proving that food can be part of the solution. From a kid arrested for wandering aimlessly to the reluctant founder of a global movement, Yvon Chouinard's story is powerful proof that you can build a life and a business around your passions. That doing the right thing isn't just good for your soul, it's good for the bottom line. He never wanted to be a businessman, but by refusing to play by the rules, he became one of the greatest and most influential of our time. So what do we take away from all this? As I've sat with this book, a few powerful lessons have really stuck with me. First is the idea that the best businesses aren't born from chasing money, but from solving a problem. Yvon Chouinard wasn't trying to build an empire. He just wanted to make better climbing gear for himself and his buddies. The business was a side effect of his passion and his obsession with quality. This is profound. When you focus on creating something genuinely excellent, something that serves a real need, success often follows naturally. The profit, as he says, happens when you do everything else right. The second lesson is about the real nature of risk. On the surface, Chouinard looks like a massive risk-taker. He killed his best-selling product, switched to materials nobody was using, and gave away millions. But he's crystal clear. They always did their homework. Before jumping to organic cotton, they researched it exhaustively. Before launching a new product, they tested it relentlessly in the field. It's a reminder that true courage isn't reckless. It's making bold moves based on deep conviction and solid preparation. But the most important idea, the one I think can genuinely change how you see the world, is the philosophy of the examined life. It's the idea that we have a responsibility to question everything, especially the things we take for granted. Chouinard didn't just accept that cotton shirts came with formaldehyde, he asked why. He didn't accept that his pittons were damaging rocks, he asked if there was a better way. This relentless curiosity is the engine of all progress, both for his company and for society. We live in a world that discourages these hard questions. It's easier to just buy the cheap t-shirt, ignore where our food comes from, assume someone else will solve the big problems. Chouinard's life challenges that complacency. He proves that one person, one company, asking the right questions can actually change the world. So how can you apply this? You don't need to start a billion-dollar company. It starts smaller. First, start leading your own examined life. Next time you buy something, ask a few more questions. Where did this come from? Do I actually need it? Will it last? Is there a better, more durable, more responsible option? Second, embrace the philosophy that the more you know, the less you need. Instead of piling up more gadgets and gear, invest in skills and knowledge. Learn to repair your clothes, your bike, your electronics. Mastery, not materialism, is the real source of freedom. And finally, find your own 1%. It doesn't have to be money. It can be 1% of your time. Find a cause you're passionate about, a local park, an animal shelter, a community garden, and give it a small, consistent piece of your energy. Action is the cure for despair. The story of Patagonia is about a man who never set out to change the world, but did exactly that by simply refusing to compromise on his values. It's a powerful reminder that the most radical thing you can do in a world of consumption and convenience is to live a life of intention, quality, and responsibility. That was a summary of Let My People Go Surfing by Yvon Chouinard. We've explored the heart of his philosophy today, but I've got to be honest with you. Listening to a summary is like looking at a picture of a mountain. Reading the book is like actually climbing it. The real magic lives in the details, the personal stories, the quiet reflections, the moments where a single sentence hits you right in the chest. This summary is your map, showing you the terrain, so you can decide if this is a climb worth making. If anything we've talked about has sparked something in you, I really encourage you to grab a copy. The experience of reading it yourself is where the real transformation happens. You'll find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if this journey today has given you some value, a spark of inspiration, or a new way to think, please take a moment to like this episode and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know we're on the right track, and make sure you won't miss our next dive into another life-changing book. Let's keep learning and growing together.